Did you know that in the movie E.T. there were actually actors with dwarfism inside that costume? Or that R2-D2 in Star Wars was brought to life by little people? Or that movies like Avatar, The Way of Water, Indiana Jones, and Jaws have all employed the use of stunt performers with dwarfism? Today we're going to be taking a look at some of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters and how stunt performers and body doubles with dwarfism have helped to bring some of the most iconic scenes to life and beloved characters from Star Wars to Avatar. But before we begin, make sure you subscribe and turn the bell notifications on. I love movies though, and I love knowing how movies are made, and I think one fact about Hollywood is that people just aren't aware of how many little people play a huge role behind the scenes at bringing to life our favorite TV shows and movies, and have since really the inception of this industry. Actors with dwarfism have been working back in the days of the silent films with Charlie Chaplin and other silent film legends. Today you might not see as many in on-screen roles, but there's a lot of little people working behind the scenes, specifically as stunt performers and body doubles for child actors, that I wanted to highlight today because they have brought some iconic characters to life. I think one of the most recognizable examples that people might know of is Warwick Davis in Star Wars. That was one of his first roles in the film industry period. He was around 13 years old, and he played Wicket the Ewok, which is now a fan favorite, but for him was the first role that he had. And this small role in Star Wars Return of the Jedi would launch his career as a professional actor because people just loved working with him. He had fire, he had drive, and that really took him so far, as we now know. He's the highest grossing supporting actor currently, from his roles in Harry Potter, Willow, the Leprechaun series, and so many other TV shows and movies. But he started off as an Ewok, which is technically a stunt performance role. It takes a certain type of actor and a certain type of endurance to wear a fursuit and then be able to navigate through these scenes. So oftentimes specific actors are utilized for these roles. It's not something that every actor can or wants to do. Specifically with the Ewok costumes, a lot of these little people who performed these roles talked about not being able to see diddly squat. They basically had to be told by the production team where to go, where to step. They just were kind of guessing where they were going because of these costumes and the lack of visibility in them. And they were also hard to move in. They were really hot and sweaty, but Warwick just loved being on set. He was loved by so many people like Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford, and most importantly George Lucas, who later on would go and produce Willow specifically for Davis because he was like, I need that guy to have his own movie. And what's really interesting about Star Wars, which is why I've actually grown to love it over the years, is this because it's provided the most opportunities for people with dwarfism than any other studio out there. Star Wars, from its inception to its recent series and shows on Disney Plus, have employed dozens and dozens, if not over 100 little people performers. They've played droids, they've played aliens, they've played Ewoks, they've played stunt doubles. You have people like Deep Roy, who were critical for scenes where Yoda was seen walking in some of the earliest films. It was one of his first roles as well in the industry. Star Wars has helped launch so many people's career who also have dwarfism and who might not have been given the same chances to participate in such big blockbuster films or in the film industry in general. But George Lucas really made it a point to include people with dwarfism. And fun fact about Star Wars, Luke, Leia, and Uncle Ben and Aunt Baru? I'm not a nerd, I don't know their names, okay? But Luke's aunt and uncle, they were all supposed to be little people. So much so that George Lucas is on record saying that he had done screen tests of actors with dwarfism playing Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, and the aunt and uncle. And screen tests, for those of you who are unfamiliar with, is basically they audition these performers, they bring them in, they go through multiple rounds of casting, and then they want to see what they look like, you know, on screen. Sometimes they have them in costume even, and they're kind of doing like test footage almost to see as close as possible if these actors are the direction they want to go with. And unfortunately, he says it didn't go the direction of casting these performers in these roles, but he did find a way ultimately to still include actors with dwarfism in the Star Wars universe. And even though George Lucas has taken a step back with his involvement in, you know, the casting and storytelling of Star Wars, you still see so many little people, you know, being called up for every single TV show, every single movie that comes out. I mean, I was watching The Acolyte, and one of the first sequences is a character interacting with a little person who is dressed up like a foreign species on a different planet, but still, you can't use kids for these roles because of labor laws and also because of how much endurance you would need to have these costumes on for 12 to 14 hours a day. So little people really have come into handy with bringing the life and the magic of some of these foreign planets and fantasy worlds to life. From Warwick Davis to even Tony Cox, who is most commonly known for his role in Bad Santa, to Kiran Shah, to Deep Roy, so many actors that have worked for decades in this industry on some of our favorite movies all started in the Star Wars universe. And that's why, again, I love Star Wars so much, and I can't wait for the day that there's a speaking role where a little person gets to play, I wouldn't say a human character, because just like not hidden underneath a suit, okay? The Ewoks are adorable, give me 14 of them, but I can't wait for a badass little person to really get their time to shine in the Star Wars universe. You also commonly see stunt performers with dwarfism used as body doubles or scale doubles, so in scenes where they want to make something appear bigger than normal by using actors with dwarfism. So in Jaws, Steven Spielberg had a scene where Hooper jumps into a shark cage and is trying to stab Jaws, and most great white sharks are around 16 feet long, and the animatronic that they used in the film was 25 feet. And they really wanted to use an actual shark for this scene for authenticity, but obviously you would be able to tell how small the shark was compared to the average height actor. So what they did is they had a little person come in and used him as a scale double so that in comparison his body would look smaller, the shark would look bigger. That stunt performer's name was Carl Rizzo, and he was around 4 feet 11 inches tall, and there's not much out there about his involvement in the movie besides a few little tidbits, which again is why I love this channel so much, because I think it's an awesome way of kind of cementing these people's legacy who might be forgotten and might be left out of the film's credits, because so many people work on movies, and oftentimes I find that little people in movies like Willy Wonka or The Wizard of Oz, even if they have huge contributions like playing Oompa Loompas or Munchkins, they're usually left out of the credits, unfortunately. So next time you watch Jaws, just know in some scenes there's actually a little person using some trickery to make you think that it's actually someone else. This next person is one of my favorite for multiple reasons. His name was Felix, and he was an Italian circus performer, and if you didn't know, I also grew up working in the circus, and I also love the Addams Family. And if you are familiar, there was a 1960s TV show, the original Addams Family series, and there's a character named Cousin It, and he has this long, beautiful hair that covers his entire body, and that was actually played by Felix. He started his career in Hollywood working as a body double and a stand-in for child actors, because in the mid-1960s there was a lot of children being written into movies and TV shows, but because of things like labor laws, they couldn't utilize children for more than a set amount of time every single day on set, so they would oftentimes swap them out with a little person for certain scenes where you didn't need to get up close and see the facial features, and they could use someone of the same height as the child that they were swapping in for. So that's how Felix actually started working in Hollywood. He had retired from working in the circus where he was a stunt performer. He did bareback riding, which is like riding horses as they race around the ring and doing tricks on them. He was a very talented stunt performer. So he transitioned into acting after retiring from the circus, from touring all over the United States with Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, which I have also worked for. So I feel a very closeness to, I feel very close to Felix and his career path, even though it took place, almost 100 years ago at this point. But he transitioned into body doubling for children, and then he eventually got his big break in Addams Family. And although you don't see his face, Cousin It is a character that has transcended multiple generations. He's been featured in live action versions of the Addams Family, in animated versions, even on stage in musical versions of the Addams Family, and it all started with a little person. Felix's filmography is nothing less than impressive. He was a stunt performer in movies like the original Planet of the Apes. He was in shows like Bewitched, Bonanza, Buck Rogers. He was in Star Wars, as so many little people that I mentioned today are gonna have appeared in Star Wars. Star Wars, you should let me write a little script for you one day. He was also a stunt performer in Indiana Jones. He was even in Ghostbusters. My man got around, and he lived a long life and passed away sadly at 84. I can only imagine how fulfilling his career was, especially starting in a small town in Italy and then ending up in the United States, traveling the world in a circus, and then starring in some of the most iconic and legendary and celebrated films and TV shows. Peter Jackson's The Hobbit also employed a lot of scale doubles with Dwarfism, and if you want to know more in depth about those, go to my video called Tyrion Lannister and Dwarfism in Fantasy, where I talked about this a little bit more in depth. But essentially, the Hobbit characters in this film are smaller than average, not average type people, but smaller than other characters in this world, and in order to achieve this effect while still using average height actors, they cast little people. So you had countless little people who were dressed up and modeled to look exactly like their average height character counterparts, and in certain scenes they would swap one out for another to help with perspective and editing down the line, to trick the audiences into thinking that these average height actors were really actually proportionally smaller. I know a lot of people are actually pretty familiar with this situation, and I think this is probably one of the most popular examples and most known examples of stunt performers with dwarfism, because they still had to do the same rehearsals, the same stunt choreography, the same training. They spent all of those years with the rest of the cast. I think they filmed the movie in New Zealand as well. Kenny Baker is the one who originated the role of R2-D2, and although there is sometimes an animatronic that is used in certain scenes, they would sometimes use both in the same scene and kind of use camera trickery to pan away and then have like the robot come out and then pan back and then have Kenny Baker in the R2-D2 suit come out. George Lucas was really intentional about R2-D2 not just being a droid. He really wanted it to have an animated personality so that people could connect with it. It's one of the most important characters in the very first movie. We start off the movie meeting R2-D2 and an important mission that he has to go and take the audience on. And Kenny Baker was a vaudevillian performer working in the UK. He was doing ice skating shows and variety shows and musical acts with his best friend who also had dwarfism, and George Lucas came specifically to him to beg him to play R2-D2 because they had built the costume but didn't have anybody small enough to fit in it. And Kenny Baker actually said no 3 times because he was like, why would I want to sit in this suit in the middle of the desert for a movie that probably is going to flop? So eventually he bribed George Lucas to also cast his best friend he was working with at the time, who was also a little person performer. George Lucas obliged, and Kenny Baker was whisked off to a galaxy far, far away to bring us one of the most iconic and memorable and most loved characters ever. I think R2 is probably one of the most famous robot characters to exist in film. He sat inside that costume with limited mobility, but he was able to control different parts of R2's movements, and I think that it definitely would not have felt the same if that was an entirely robotic performance. In the movie E.T., directed by Steven Spielberg, he was another director who I credit a lot for casting and being intentional about including and recognizing the talent of the dwarfism community, and he had not one but 2 people with dwarfism as stunt performers for the character of E.T. specifically. Pat Bilon was the one who primarily played E.T. throughout the duration of the film, but you also have Tamara, who also was a little person who was sometimes in the E.T. suit. And there was several other actors. There was a child, and then another person with a disability who also contributed to bringing the character to life. So next time you're watching that movie, just know that there's an actor with dwarfism sweating his little ass off in there. Could not be me. Ed Osmond has also been working tirelessly in this industry for a long time as of late, bringing movies like Dumbo to life. He was one of the stunt performers who helped provide references for the animators for the character of Dumbo specifically, so that's another instance you can watch that movie and know, hey, a little person helped, map out this character, to help contribute to this character coming to life. And he also was in recently the Dungeons and Dragons movies. What else has he done? He was in Dumbo. He was in Avengers Age of Ultron. He was in The Dark Materials, I got the hiccups. Dungeons and Dragons, Jupiter Ascending, Into the Woods. Into the woods, it's time to go. I hate to leave, I have to though. Into the woods, it's time to go. I hate to leave this journey. I don't claim to know the lyrics, okay? The one song I love from Into the Woods is Children Will Listen. That's one of the best songs in musical theater. Careful the things you say, children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see and learn. I don't think those are the lyrics. And then you have my friend Molly Miller, who has been working for years now on the Avatar films, and similarly to how people with dwarfism body double for human actors with, I was gonna say dwarfism, human actors who are children, you also have little people doubling for child actors and other roles in films like Avatar. Molly is not the only little person who's working on that project in those films. There are other little people as well, but I personally have the pleasure of knowing Molly. She's worked on shows like Stranger Things, she's been in Grey's Anatomy, she's been in horror films, she's been everywhere. She's doubled and been a stunt performer on so many different projects, and she inspires me every single day. She's a go-getter. When I interviewed her a little bit ago, she was just talking about being really proactive about finding these opportunities. None of us are really born into like the industry, and a lot of us have to fight to get opportunities, and Molly is 100% a perfect example of having grit and determination and literally walking onto sets and going, is there a job for me here? And then going, you know what, why not? Also, Warwick Davis played in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as Marvin the Robot, even though I'm forgetting the actor's name right now. He played Severus Snape. Oh, I'm so sorry to him. He did the voice for Marvin, but it was Warwick Davis in the actual costume on set every day. And again, Warwick has been everywhere, all at once. He deserves being the highest grossing supporting actor. There's a reason for that. But which one of these films is your favorite? I wasn't a fan of the first Avatar. Sorry. The second one, though, sobbing in the theater. There was just something so beautiful about how the whole thing was about, like, relationships and family and animals and, like, our relationship with, like, wildlife. And I have a phobia of the vast ocean and sea creatures, but that movie, I just love that it took time exploring real things that, we're facing in today's climate, unfortunately. I also am a huge fan of Star Wars in recent years. I love characters like Rey. I love some of the actors who have been a part of the Star Wars universe, like Lupita Nyong'o. I love Amandla Stenberg, Amandla. We love you either way. And now knowing that there's characters like R2-D2, which I'm sure I said RT-D2 multiple times in this video. Watch your tongue when you correct me. But I just love it. There's so many movies that we consider to be classics, so many movies that are blockbusters, so many movies that every person in this world, regardless if you're from that corner of the world or this corner of the world, if you're a toddler, if you're an older person, you know who these characters are. Some of these characters are known even without even seeing these movies that they're a part of. And they're little people at the end of the day. Every time I see a reference of E.T., I'm just like, that was, technically it was a little person. So these are all facts that you can share at your next family gathering or party. A little, party trick you can pull out. Like, did you know that R2-D2 is technically a little person? I actually don't know the context you would need to pull that out. But either way, comment down below if you have a favorite person that I mentioned or a favorite... Oh, also Addams Family. Love Addams Family. We don't talk enough about Addams Family. I love reading your guys' comments. I'm always so happy to see so many of you guys leaving a comment on these videos. And thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. I just started posting not only a month ago, and we are already hitting a milestone that I personally have always wanted to reach, because I think it would be so cool to have a nice little safe corner on the internet where we can just have some fun, learn, talk about some hard things, but also talk about some fun stuff like this. So I appreciate you being here, and that's all I really have for you today. Until next time, my name's Aubrey Smalls. I love you so much. Keep going.